Hello everybody and welcome to a fairly special video where I brought you here to the hills of England, but that's not where we're staying for today's video. But first, a little bit of setup. We're celebrating a big one today, 10,000 subs. That's enough to probably take on the entire military of a small country, which is quite scary. But yeah, there's a lot of us, and it's weird for me today because I haven't actually reached that milestone at the time of recording. We're at about 9,300, but due to scheduling and other stuff, I'm having to record this at a certain time to get the video out on time. So yeah, a bit of a weird one for me, but we're doing something special today. And I'm sure the first question you've got is, why are we out here? Well, the reason for that is because I think it looks quite nice as a backdrop. And your next question is probably, where are we going and what are we doing for today's video? Well, we're doing a Q&A, like a lot of YouTubers have done in the past, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I'm taking you somewhere quite far away from the hills of England, but somewhere that doesn't look too dissimilar when we get down to it. But to get there, I can't use my legs, can't use my feet, can't use a car. We're gonna have to get on a plane. So, as I answer your questions, let's travel to Norway. So we are here at the Oslo Opera House, a very large building, and I am not on a lot of sleep. This is our first stop and our quickest stop because this isn't our main place that we're staying in today's video, but it's a nice place to stop and answer a couple questions before we move on. Considering that this building, I believe, is a big inspiration for the Battlefield 2042 map Kaleidoscope, which I have a lot of history with, considering my history of Battlefield 2042. Feels right to be here, and it's a very cool building nonetheless. So we're going to start off with a couple of comments, starting with one of our YouTube members, James Bales, asking, what do you think the chances are there of being a PSVR3, and do you think it will be during the lifespan of the PS6 or later? I can't really say for sure. I mean, nobody knows what Sony is thinking. I would say, if I had to hedge a bet or a guess, that it would probably come in the PS6's life cycle if we're going from the PSVR to the PSVR2 life cycle and gap. But, I mean, if Sony aren't invested into VR anymore, as some people are saying they might not be, then who knows, maybe it'll never come, but we'll have to wait and see. Heavy Metal Game Cat comes in saying, if you could have a VR game about any comic book character, who would it be? To be honest, it would probably be a manga character like Eren Yeager, and luckily we are getting an Attack on Titan VR game. We haven't seen any gameplay of it, which scares me very much, but I will be picking up a MetaQuest probably to play that, which is very exciting. In terms of Western comics though, gotta be Spider-Man. We haven't had a good Spider-Man VR game ever, really, and I would love to see that. Monogon Industries 911 comes in saying, what makes VR gaming special to you? Special enough to create a whole channel around it? Well, one of the main ones is the amount of personality you can get into videos. It's such a special niche of gaming as well in terms of what you can do with it, how you can connect with an audience, and it's a niche of gaming that really connected with me when I first tried it, and it really blew me away, and I haven't stopped playing it since. And really that's why it's so special. It's because it's fresh, because it's new, and because I can kind of get in on it on its like infancy, which makes it, you know, I got a connection to it, it feels like. And finally, for our last question here, Jamesh2263 says, do you know when Bravo Team 2 will be announced? No, but based on the first one, hopefully never, because I really didn't like that game. But who knows? Anyway, that'll do us for this one location. I'm incredibly tired on no hours of sleep, but damn, Oslo is a city that I didn't expect to be so great. But here we are, in a Battlefield map pretty much. What a crazy turn of events. But we can't stay here too long. We've got to hop onto another train and head to our real main location of today's video, which is very special and a lot more rural than this. Welcome to the second leg of our train journey, even more sleep deprived this time. And this time, it's a 7-hour journey across the entire length of Norway. But that gives me plenty of time to answer only 4 more questions of yours since I have to pace this video out. Our first question comes from Twisted Halo Music 4497. It says, what are your thoughts on Dying Light 1 VR? That's my dream VR game, and I'd love to have it with full motion controls. Realistically, will probably never happen because studios, but I'd love to see it. I mean, we just got Stride Fates coming out with a load of parkour mechanics. Something like that would work great with Dying Light. Give me a kick button like Blade and Sorcery, and we got something working there, definitely. A very different question. It comes from Joshua Taylor 5119. Do you own a onesie? Not one that fits me anymore. Comic Book Guy Gamecat says, do you think if PSVR3 happens, do you think it should release on PC day one? If it happens, I think definitely yes, that's going to boost sales. They should have done that with PSVR2 from the get-go. I think Sony were kind of testing the waters a bit to see what sales were going to do before they made the PCVR adapter that's coming in August now. But yeah, I think PSVR3 definitely day one. Since it's a precedent now, they've said they're going to do it for PSVR2. We expect the same, if not better, for the next headset. Maybe without a breakout box next time, because we left that behind with PSVR, and now we're getting it again with PSVR2. And finally, Jolly Jep says, if you could pick any Sony or adjacent franchise to come to PSVR2, what would you pick? It would either be The Last of Us. We've never had a fully fledged Naughty Dog VR game like that, and I think that would be amazing. Even if it got handed over to another studio, I think it could be amazing. Or Spider-Man, because we've never had a good Spider-Man VR game. So please give me Insomniac Spider-Man. They've made VR games in the past. Give them the reins again. Anyway, I'm going to sit back and enjoy the views now. And I'll see you when we reach our destination. We are on the top of the most accessible mountain in Bergen, which is called Fjord. It's a very steep walk, but now we're at the top and we can have a look at the city of Bergen and welcome you to it. It's time to answer the next few questions. First one comes from Tauhi Delali 2652, asking when is the earliest PSVR2 games could arrive through Flat to VR. I would say probably early next year, considering their port in time. And also, could Sony have held back the next few title announcements for the next big event, which is September? I would say definitely so. That is possible. They could have done that for both VR and Flat, but we'll have to wait and see. Dig Out Fan First says, you remind me of Sheldon Cooper. Thanks. My question, do you think Sony makes PSVR 3? I think probably, more probably than not. We didn't know anything about PSVR2 until it kind of just like popped out of nowhere on the PS blog one day, and I think it'll probably be the same for the next iteration of PlayStation VR. And user CI4CP9XS2L, long name, asks a bunch of questions which you can now see on screen that, to be honest, I'll probably answer in their own dedicated videos because they're very, very good ideas. Although out of the PSVR1 games I want ported to PSVR2, give me Wipeout, give me Farpoint, give me Blood and Truth, and a remaster of PSVR Worlds, please, because they are very, very good. Anyway, we're going to head down and jump on a boat and make our way down to the fjord, which you can see in front of me. The weather has turned a little bit for the worse. It started raining a lot here, but that does mean that I can sit here and answer some questions before we do go out and venture out, because out there I can't record with my microphone because it would probably get water malfunction and die. So our first question comes from Eclipse DJ saying, do you think that if more mainstream releases had a VR mode like Resi 8 and 4, No Man's Sky, etc., more people would take up VR? Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the big reasons that I've seen a few of the Resident Evil fans that I know pick up the PSVR 2 or at least try it. I do think franchises and IPs are the way forward of making headway into selling more headsets, getting more people to buy in, and ultimately increase VR in scope, not just PSVR 2, but all VR. Price is also a huge factor, they say. Maybe not going with OLED could have pitched PSVR 2 at a more competitive price point. I absolutely agree with that. Sony were probably thinking about the PC VR market a bit at least before launch, so adding OLED means that PlayStation VR 2 is one of the only cheap-ish OLED PC VR headsets that you can buy, so that's definitely something that they wanted to include. Potion Plays says, you ever going to do a meetup? I'd love to see your skills. I have no skills, but it would be cool to meet up with everybody. I mean, there's 10,000 of us now. That's absolutely ridiculous. But I think the closest thing that would happen in terms of a meetup would be maybe me going to PAX and meeting up with the Game Cat and the rest of the Without Parole group. Pup Game says, did you actually finish Madison VR? This is the publishing company behind Madison. The answer is I'm about 70% way through the story, and I don't know if I'm going to pick it back up anytime soon because it is too scary. Maybe people pester me enough in the comments, I'll finish it off with a little Let's Play. I think that would be fun. Bellows Kleenex says, I initially started watching your videos because I thought you were Miles Dyer, but I didn't know his name. We're practically the same person now on the Parole podcast. The first time I went on there, people were just saying, oh, it's Miles, but with a different haircut. And yeah, I see that. Especially to the American audience, we probably sound exactly the same. The next question from Edward Borges 9731 is what is the best game you've played on the PSVR2 since its release? For me, best game changes so often. At the moment, it's Gran Turismo 7. I'm a lot more into sim racing now, and that's one of the games that's really helped me get into VR sim racing and then led me on to F1 VR as well, although I do prefer GT. But GT7 is the best game hands down for me right now. If you asked me at the end of last year, as you would have seen in my awards show basically last year, it was Resi 4 Remake, but right now it's GT7. In the past, it has been Resi 8 and Horizon, but GT7 is the king right now for me. Apanamaku says, what is your advice for first-time players to VR? How long does it take for the body, eyes, etc. to adjust itself? Is motion sickness a given when playing the first few days? Motion sickness is not really a given. I don't remember actually having it back in 2016, it must have been when the PSVR 1 came out. But I did start off with a few static games like Astro's Player in VR. It is just a natural thing. Your body will think that it's moving, but your mind will tell you that it's not moving because it knows it's smarter than that. Just, you need to take breaks every time you feel it. Just stop, let your body know that it's not trying to kill you. And after a couple weeks of doing that, you should be able to go longer and longer in VR and then eventually play basically infinite sessions without feeling motion sickness at all. And the final question for in this room, while it rains outside before we head out there, is from super cool username MQ4RI, saying, what was the first ever VR game that you played? The first fully fledged VR game I played was probably Beat Saber back at Comic-Con ages and ages ago. And the first real game that I played through was the Playroom VR on there, because that was, I think it was free with the console when you got the PSVR, and it was so damn good and it hooked me in from there. And from there, I've played hundreds of titles thanks to this channel and thanks to you guys for supporting me and getting devs in touch, basically, so thank you. Anyway, now that we're done, let's head out for a little while and see what we can find in the rain. We're on our way up to a very, very special and abandoned part of Bergen up on this trail. But before we get there, taking a little intermission to answer a couple more questions. The first one is from Electrical, our good friend, asking what my favorite film is and do I think it would be a good flat screen or VR game. My favorite film, can split that into two categories. One of them is Jurassic Park, and yes, it would make a very, very good VR game. We've already had one, but didn't have the biggest budget. I'd like to see that redone. My other favorite film is Your Name, and if you watch that film, you'll know that is impossible to make into a game, flat screen or VR. That'll be something more than a visual novel, but it will be very cool to see it in VR rendered. Our next question comes from Mapu1977 asking, when do we get more Behemoth? You've had your answer to that question now. I hope you're satisfied with that video a couple of weeks back. Gone Hollow Media says, can you see yourself doing YouTube as a full-time career if you aren't doing so already? I'm not doing so already. I'm in university, and that's a moth. I could see myself, I don't know, if it ended up that way. That's not currently what I'm pursuing towards. Of course, I'm gonna, after uni, look for a different job or whatever, but if it ended up that way, it would be a very fun career path. I enjoy doing it, and if it ended up that way, I'd definitely take it. And the last question is from Darth, which I'm just gonna put on the screen here. And Darth, you know what you've done. Just read that and regret. Anyway, up the hill. you join us at our second to last stop in the church in the centre of Bergen before we climb up Ulriken, Bergen's biggest and more challenging climb, which will take us about 3 hours. And before we do that, it's time to answer a couple more questions. The first of which is by JJBZ9. What got you into VR, and will the Idiot series come back? What got me into VR was the Playroom VR and playing Beat Saber at a local Comic Con. And since then, I've just loved it and made my channel dedicated to it, basically. And I don't think the Idiots will come back. We might occasionally do an episode or two that's like an hour long on a game like DayZ, where you can do something quite like episodic. But yeah, it's a part of my editing journey and life, which I've kind of left behind a little bit, because I did that for 5 years. It's done now. I don't really need to do it again, but yeah, those are videos I'll always keep up, but I don't think I'll really do any more consistently. The Once and Future VR King says, what are your thoughts on the alleged trademarks from Sony regarding your new Astrobot VR? I think they're pretty much nothing. They could be something, but most of the time when we get these trademarks, they're just there for kind of safety purposes and to cover Sony's back if they want to do something. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to. And Flaming Teabag 4572 says, is the state of Sony's first-party VR game just part of the wider problem with the gaming world, or do you feel they have a roadmap that they've moved away from? I don't think they've moved away from like any roadmap, to be honest. They kind of probably just got their plans. If they will still be sticking to them, they'll reveal it in September, but I don't really think the launch of PSVR2 was too outlandish compared to what Sony had kind of predicted it would be. But I do think that the wider world of gaming is just having an issue right now and going through a problem where games take too long, they're too expensive. I don't think Sony's going to like fully distance themselves from the headset. Maybe they will, we'll see that in September, but my current prediction would be that they won't. Now with those three answered, let's head up Ulriken for quite a long hike. Welcome everybody to the top of Mount Ulriken. 1,333 steps later, we finally reached this view where we're going to answer our last three questions from our Patreon members, starting with Hazit Mirza, who says, can you talk us through the process of making a video from conception to posting? It really depends on the video. If it's first impressions or a news video, they're pretty easy to kind of get up on their feet and going because it's pretty simple recording and editing. For a more in-depth review or analysis, it will take me a couple days to really get everything together, to test mechanics that I want to, and to research. That's ultimately what it comes down to, though, is just enjoying the workflow and knowing what works for me, and that's my process basically. Ace Gamer says, I'm actually pretty curious how you stay on top of all this VR news and still find time to capture it and stream. Again, it comes down to just being obsessive about the topic that I'm talking about. I love VR. VR has been in my life for a long time now, and the content creation stuff just kind of came as a natural extension of me enjoying VR. But it is just keeping on top of all the VR news and kind of being tuned into different channels. And it's lucky that I have some communication channels to devs and stuff like that, which can let me know and give me heads up when things are really moving and happening and embargoes are up. And it lets me organize my content and my thoughts. So that's basically how I stay on top of things. Finally, Hippie Pickle says, I'm interested in your origins of gaming, first console, and which game hooked you as a gamer, and your first VR experience. First VR experience, as I've said in this video, Beat Saber and Playroom VR, but my first game was Halo Combat Evolved, and I absolutely loved it. Back on the original Xbox, it was the best, but Halo was my kind of gaming inception. Anyway, thank you all for watching this video. Thank you for joining me on not just this hike, but this whole journey through Norway. Thank you for 10,000 subs, that's a ridiculous number. To celebrate like 100k, we're gonna have to one up this. We're gonna have to go to like Antarctica or something like that. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will be back in a day or two, because for now I'm just gonna sit here and enjoy this view.